Welcome to our chamber event here at the Senior Center. We want to thank the town of Rocky Hill for hosting this event. This is our candidate forum. These meetings are held to allow candidates for state senate and state representative to speak with chamber members in a more intimate setting. All candidates representing our districts have been invited to attend. Now, some ground rules. Each candidate will have 3 to 5 minutes to speak on their campaign, their future plans, and anything they deem relevant. We'll have a strict 3 to 5 minute time limit to allow all candidates to speak. Candidates will receive a 30-second warning ahead of their ending time. And now we will hear from our Senator Matt Lesser. There he is.
Good morning. I think it was inevitable. The second I stuck a pastry in my mouth, I was going to get called on to speak. So I've been at this long enough. I should know about that and plan ahead. Good morning, everybody. I'm Senator Matt Lesser. I'm the token Democrat you're going to be hearing from this morning. But it's great to see everybody on this crisp fall day. I was scraping ice off my car for the first time this season. I'm sure we will be doing a lot of that going forward. Look, it's been a tough couple of years for the whole country, for the world. Certainly, we've seen our fair share of challenges. But working together, we've made an awful lot of progress for the state of Connecticut and for the town of Rocky Hill. We have been able to pass a bipartisan budget, balancing the state's budget, improving our balance books, and after years of Connecticut being a state that couldn't get its act together, we have the largest rainy day fund in state history. Our bond rating has gone up, not down. We've been able to cut taxes by over $600 million, the largest single tax cut in state history. That's meant we've been able to cut the gas tax, we've been able to pass the child tax credit, we've been able to exempt annuities, pensions and Social Security from taxation. We're making real progress to try to support people where they are, even as we deal with real challenges like inflation. And then looking locally, we've been able to make major investments in Rocky Hill as well, securing a steep grant to bring sidewalks into the Century Hills area, making sure that we got the town the $1 million to tear down the old Ames building, and great to see that progress happening, support to bring in funding to connect the sand pit for economic development right here in Rocky Hill. We're making major investments. And we're also taking on real challenges like public safety, passing a bipartisan juvenile crime bill this year that'll hopefully make a dent, giving local police like Chief Custer the tools that you need to make sure that this community is safe. My big interests, a lot of them are focused on healthcare, making sure that everyone can afford access to healthcare, that essential services are covered. I serve with Representative Kerry Wood as we are the co-chairs of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee, really focused on a lot of those basic costs that are essential to any small business in the state, but also making sure that we're addressing some of the needs of our real estate professionals in the area. So it's been a pleasure to serve the town of Rocky Hill as well as the other 4 towns that I represent. I always like to be a resource for the chamber. I work very closely with Larry McHugh, who's the president of the overall chamber, and want to be a resource for everybody over here. So I can go on forever. I'm a state senator. I'm very capable of filibustering all morning, but I'm really interested in hearing from your questions and just figuring out what we can do to better serve the people of Rocky Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Lisa MAROTTA.
Well, it's really odd to be here not as the mayor of Rocky Hill, so if I seem a little nervous, it's because I'm here in a completely different capacity. I learned from the last presentation I don't have a lot of time to talk, so I'm going to just put this right here. Maybe, Henry, we can maybe lean it over here. So you have a general overview of, my agenda. So good morning. Thank you to the Chamber for having this incredible event. For those of you who don't know me, I am the 2-term mayor of Rocky Hill. I want to give you a little bit of my professional background. I am a former special prosecutor with the Division of Criminal Justice Office of the Chief State's Attorney. I have many years of experience as an attorney in a solo practice, which I operate myself, doing commercial transactions, commercial real estate, commercial litigation. Prior to law school, for many years, I worked as a mental health and addiction counselor I worked in crisis intervention. And so really I'm running because I see firsthand that there is many of the issues we face at the municipal level will really only be improved by better state legislation. So some of the key areas I'm hoping to focus on are public safety. As mayor of Rocky Hill, public safety has always been my top priority, and it will be up at the Senate. I want to share with you something that it's not funny, but maybe it's ironic, that I saw on the state's website. Last night about midnight, I was looking up police accountability and, you know, how we got to this point. And on the state website, there's this thing, and it says fact, maybe fact or fiction. And it talks about police accountability. And it says all the things that police accountability is, with these big green check marks. And then on the other side, it says all the things it is not, with these big red X's. And this is what it said. It said that it is not something that will erode police morale. It is not something that will cause police to retire. And it is not something that will endanger communities. Now I ask you 2 years later, is that in fact true? You know, I was one of the people who brought up these concerns 2 years ago, and they fell on deaf ears. And unfortunately, we're seeing the results today. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I'm also running to protect families and businesses. Can you just tell me where the time is?
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you. To protect families and businesses, because we all know Connecticut has gotten too expensive to live here, that our businesses have far too many regulations, too much red tape. They're having trouble getting through the pandemic, but they've had trouble pre-COVID. And that's because there are just too many things, too many hoops for them to jump through. Whether I'm talking to the mom and pop donut shop, or the pizza shop owner, or the big corporations, they want to see those regulations streamlined. They want to see it easier for people to do business. And that's one of the things I'm proud to say we focused here on Rocky Hill, and it's why you see a lot of the revitalization efforts happening. And then finally, I want to focus a little bit on mental health, addiction, and the fentanyl crisis, because this is something that really, these are matters that actually required a very swift response pre-COVID. You know, these are not new issues. These are just issues that we've sort of swept under the rug. You know, there's a huge stigma when it comes to mental health. That's something I want to address. I want to make sure that people feel safe, that there are resources for them, that there are resources for families, that we have adequate tools, that we have adequate social workers. And that's something that we focus here on Rocky Hill, and something I intend to do at the state level. So, you know, I'm really excited to have this opportunity, and I hope that I will have your support on November 8th, and I think we'll have a question and answer segment after this, so I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now we have candidate for State Representative PANKAJ PRAKASH.
Too many things in my pocket. And it's going to get worse, I know. Winter is coming. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Good morning. And thanks for making it here early, 8 o'clock. I know it's not always easy. Some of you live in Rocky Hill, some of you don't, so it's a little bit of a commute. I'm glad to be here. Actually, I'm glad to be here in the United States, as a matter of fact. Right? So I don't know how many of you know my story, but I will start there. I came to the United States as a student at UConn 22 years ago. And I have gone through every facet of American life you can imagine. I started as an international student. I worked on a work visa, H-1B visas, which I know a lot of business community cares about. I was a permanent resident, and then eventually became a proud American citizen. And I would be amiss if I did not mention that I'm an elected official right here in Rocky Hill. So this country has been good to me and a lot more So I'm running for state rep because I want to give back to this community, which has given me an opportunity to succeed. And I talk about this in my campaign. I talk about community, I talk about opportunity, and I talk about responsibility, because I think those are the three things which make America great in the real sense of the word. Anybody can come here and become an American. You go to France, you're never French. You come here to the United States, you are an American. And that's what I believe in. Like I said, I've talked about opportunity on the campaign trail a lot, and small business and businesses in general are about opportunity. They are about giving someone a start, right? That's how I think about it, right? If you don't go to college, we have talked about this, Henry, in the Rocky Education Foundation. If you don't go to college, you don't need necessarily a college degree, you can be an entrepreneur. I think we will be giving that opportunity to our young fellows coming out of college, the same opportunity I had as an international student. So make no mistake about it, guys. The number one problem facing this state is affordability. For individuals, for families, and businesses. It's all tied up. When I came to this country in 2001, we were either on the top of every list or at least in the middle of every list. Now we are 8th most expensive state in the country. We are 2nd highest tax burden in the continental United States. We have the 4th highest utility costs, and we are dead last in income growth. Dead last. And this is the data from 2022. It just came out. You can Google it. And do we want to be dead last? And we are told we are making progress, which we might be. We are moving from like 49 to 46. But is that acceptable? It is progress. Technically, it is. But do we want to be at the bottom 10% of every category? Answer for me is no. But it's a symptom of a larger problem, though. The larger problem being the one-party rule in our legislature for the last 40 years has impeded critical thinking and new ideas. The same old politicians are getting elected and reelected and recycling the same stuff from the last 30 years. Voting sometimes like 98% with their party. You tell me if that is a recipe for new ideas. I think we need to look at our incumbents and say, what have you done for me lately except for spending more money? Recycling the same old ideas from 40 years ago, taxing and spending. I look at some of the brochures. They only talk about how much money they have brought to the town. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying there should be something else. What is your vision?
30 seconds.
What is your vision for the next 2 years? That's what I want to know. Yeah, you brought $1.5 billion for X thing. It's awesome. So wrapping this up, this November 8th, and I should say this first, elections are about the future. Just because I talked about the vision, I will be amiss if I did not say that. They really are about the future, and I believe that.
Okay, thank you, PANKAJ.
Can I just finish? This November 8th, the biggest mistake we can make is to vote for the same old politics and the same old players and expect a different result. Think about that when you go into that polling booth. Thank you. Thank you, Henry.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question and answer portion. If anybody has a question, and if you don't, I have plenty of my own. So don't be shy.
Question for PRAKASH. You said in your dialogue that what is our vision for the next 2 years? Yes. What is your vision for the next 2 years?
Actually, I would be glad to talk about that. Thank you, Henry. This is good. This is open mic season, right? So this is good. I love it. So thanks for asking that question. I don't know where to put it. I'll just put it here. right next to Lisa's, right? So here's the thing. You don't have to read this, but I forgot to actually, I got like jazzed up because I had too much coffee in the morning. So I forgot to put it out there. So my vision, number one thing, like I said, number one issue for me is affordability. And it should be for everyone in this state who has lived here for any amount of time. And I see taxes as a problem, but I also see regulations and cost of doing business as a big problem as well. So let's start with taxes. I want to increase, one thing I did not say in my remarks before, this state is unaffordable for anybody who is not between 30 years old and 50 years old, okay? Young people can't live here, and seniors can't afford to start thinking about living here, okay? So let's increase the income tax exemption for seniors to $150,000, okay? Right now it like just cliffs off. We know that, right? Like it just like drops off. Let's do that, right? Number two, we have 8.5% inflation, okay? Why don't we index our tax brackets and exemptions to inflation and cost of living? We should do that. There's a bill out there which I will support day one. And I have some ideas on that as well, like which I would like to tag along with that existing bill. Number three, I want to drive down healthcare costs. I did not talk about that because we have 5 minutes, but we are gonna have double-digit increases in 2023. Over the top of a double-digit increase like in the last 4 years. Last 4 years, we have had double-digit increases. And I have a data for it. I sent out a mailer. I wanted to bring that chart, but I didn't have enough time to like put it together. I wanted to actually put it out there. We have lost 4,000 insurance jobs. What are we doing about it? We talk about making this state cool, right? The governor talks about it, the administration talks about it a lot. How do you make a state cool? By making it livable and affordable so that people can move here. Now, talking about the vision, we have made some moves in making Hartford a little bit of a magnet by bringing UConn there, right? I think we can do better in terms of like developing an economy around Hartford, right? And our cities, by the way. We need cities which are growing and thriving. I agree with that idea, that notion. So I support like anything which we can do to bring younger people into the state. I think that will create growth. That's how we'll control our taxes. Growth is the only way out, really, of this rut. I don't think we can tax our way out of this. We can only get out of this if we can grow the population. The only time we grew in the last decade was during the COVID time when a lot of New Yorkers moved from New York to here. Only time. And governor talks about that on the trail. God bless him, good for him. That's a factual, statement. And nothing to dispute there. But we have not been growing for the last decade, except for those 2 years. Do you think that's sustainable? I don't think it is. Last thing I will say this, and from the vision point of view, and this is the only place I think the senator and I will agree probably, is the paid family leave. A lot of you will be surprised to hear from me that I actually, as a Republican, support paid family leave. I think it's a conservative thing to do. The reason I support paid family leave is because as much of a pro-business conservative I am, a fiscal conservative I am, I'm also pro-family. I believe in strong families. I think the strong families are also one of the biggest factors in improving the outcomes for people in our school system, in our inner cities. Now, let's talk about Rocky Hill, right? I think the last I looked at data, there were like 600 Rocky Hillians enrolled in this program. It is a conservative program because you pay into the system, and studies have shown that if you have parental leave, you are 40% less likely, if you have income of less than $50,000 and you get parental leave from your employer, you are 50% less likely to go on food stamps. So it's an initial investment to avoid lifetime of public assistance. If you look at the data, that's what the data tells us, okay? So I support paid family leave because I think It is an investment in our community in the long run. And also, last but not the least, it does help the employers recruit and retain their good employees. So I think it's a winner. And like I said, I do believe paid family leave, as opposed to many of us, many of my colleagues in the Republican Party think, I think it's a conservative idea we should get behind. Thank you.
Lisa MAROTTA, do you want to supply an answer to the vision? Do you want to hear all candidates? And
I kind of know what Lisa's visions are because she did outline them. So they're very specific.
I think they were specific.
okay. Anyone else have any? Oh, sure.
We have a lot of work to do to continue our path forward. And I do think, one, looking at personal income growth is important, but it's not the only metric. You know, our personal incomes are far higher than they are in Mississippi or Arkansas, so I'd much rather get paid what folks in Connecticut get paid than what somebody down there gets paid. But we have to grow our economy, and that's why we're supporting growing sectors of our insurance business, for example, supporting our insurtech and our captive insurance industries, and also making it easier for us to build housing in this area, and also support other basic essentials. I think tackling the cost of living is really important, and that's why I've been vocally in support of reforms to bring down the cost of healthcare, which is one of the biggest issues affecting anybody in small business. And when I talk to people in small businesses, the reason people are unable or unwilling to take the risk to start a small business over and over again is because they are afraid of losing their employer-provided health insurance from a large employer. And we've got to address that issue if we're going to allow, if we're going to, lean into entrepreneurship and business creation. Look, there's a lot of talk about new ideas, but I want to say that there are a lot of new ideas that are out there that I think are really problematic. And all across this country, we are seeing states taking on some really disturbing new ideas, outlawing abortion, passing laws restricting people's families in various ways. Connecticut has said no to that. We've focused on quality of life issues in Rocky Hill and the state. I think some of those ideas that are out there are things that we should reject, and we should not move backwards as a state. Connecticut is not perfect. We have our fair share of challenges, but we're moving right in the right direction with Governor Lamont, and our fiscal position is stronger than it's been in decades. Under Governor Rowland, under Governor Rell, we kicked the bucket for decades on long-term costs like our state employee costs. We are finally paying down over $5 billion in long-term pension debt in the last couple of years to make sure that we can not only balance the budget in this year, but we're positioned for decades of growth beyond that. We're not saddling the next generation with the mistakes of the past generation. We're not going to do that anymore. We're moving in the right direction. I think that really speaks to our potential in this state.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Wondering if he was going to answer the vision. The question was his vision going forward. I was just wondering if
Did you want to comment on your vision? Sure.
I think I did, but you got to give me the floor. I'll speak some more. Look, I think my vision is that we're a state that supports one another. We're a state where we give people the opportunity to start small businesses, that nobody is afraid to go quit their job and do their big idea because they're afraid of losing their employer-provided health insurance, where people have the ability to buy a home in the same community that they grew up in, where people can retire with security in the community that they lived all their life without having to, if you want to go to Florida because you like the weather and you don't mind the hurricanes, God bless you. But if you want to go to Florida because you can't afford the taxes here, that's a problem. And that's why we were able to exempt pension and annuity income and Social Security income from taxation. We said, enough of that. We don't want to have taxes be the reason why people are going south. And then we're wrestling with some of the problems that our local governments are facing, are in some cases causing the big issue of property taxes. Because the elephant in the room is, look, while Connecticut has held the line on state taxes, we are seeing higher local property taxes, and that's a huge burden on small businesses, on families. When I go door to door in Rocky Hill and in our surrounding communities, more than anything else, people are really upset about property taxes. So we capped property taxes statewide this year. We're trying to address the car tax. I'd love to phase that out. I think we got to do more to address property taxes because, particularly for retirees, that's been a real killer.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Matt. I have a question directly for you. You've mentioned many times here, I don't know how many, the high cost of health insurance, and I can vouch for that because those are my clients. We've lobbied with you a number of times for some ideas on how to address this. So you've been saying that you're going to address this, but you haven't said how you're going to address it. So how are you going to address the high cost of health insurance in the state of Maine?
How much time do you have? I'm kidding. Look, there are a lot of ways, and I want to say that I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. But the cost of healthcare is a national issue, and it's a huge issue. So I will say one of the things that we have done is address particular areas where there are major issues. So this past year, I wrote a bill creating the Covered Connecticut program, and it's really targeting one population of folks who make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but they can't quite afford private health insurance on the market. And so the question is, okay, what happens if you're in the middle? How do we help folks who are in the middle who don't make enough but can't quite make the numbers work? And so we were able to smooth things over, connecting the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid and private health insurance to solve this issue, and hopefully that will help a lot of folks. But the bigger issue is addressing the underlying cost of care, because we can create as many government programs as we want, but if healthcare costs keep spiraling out of control, that's a major issue. That's why I led the fight to cap the price of insulin at $25 a month. That's the lowest price in the country, and that will help anybody in this room with type 1 diabetes. But we also have to make sure that we're looking at best practices. The state of Massachusetts figured out if they got everyone around a table, hospitals, pharmaceutical manufacturers, insurers, and when prices go up, you have to talk about it. You just explain where the price increase is coming from. That works. So we did that. We created we copied the Massachusetts Health Policy Commission, and we asked the Office of Health Strategy to identify where health prices are going up, set a targeted benchmark for inflation, and then address it. And it was a bipartisan proposal. In Massachusetts, that saved over $8 billion in healthcare costs. We've started that conversation in Connecticut, and my hope is that we're going to be able to bring things down. On prescription drug prices, Congress and the President passed recently the Inflation Reduction Act, and they had a provision in there allowing for the first time Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. What I'd really like to do is give our private plans and the state plans the ability to piggyback on those negotiated prices to bring down the price of the price of prescription drugs. I think that could be a real net asset for insurers, for customers in Connecticut. I think that will provide a lot of promise. Prescription drug prices are the single fastest growing cost of healthcare. And you'd like to think that it's because of innovation, and there is a lot of innovation in prescription drugs, but a lot of these are drugs that have been on the market for decades. And somebody comes in, they buy up a drug, and then they jack up the prices. And we don't have much of a choice. We have to take the drugs that we need. And so that's been one of the big challenges. And the last thing, and I could go on forever, is addressing consolidation. We have in our region one hospital network that's been buying up a lot of chains. I got nothing against them, gone there, gotten great care, but I really believe in competition. And when you see growing consolidation in the healthcare space, you're going to see higher prices. So we've got to challenge, give state regulators the tools to reject mergers when they're not in the public interest. When it's about consolidation, we need more hospitals. We need more competition in that space. I think that will lead to lower prices.
All right, thank you. Do either of the other two candidates want to talk about healthcare? No? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Matt, is there any thought about resurrecting the idea of like small businesses piggyback off of the state insurance program?
Yes, thank you, Carol, and it's good to see you. The question was, has there been any thought about allowing small businesses to piggyback on the state employee program? Look, that's an idea I've supported in the past. That's called the public option. I get great health insurance as a state senator, and the question is, well, why shouldn't any small business out there be able to do the same, to purchase without a subsidy the same health insurance that I get? I think it's a good idea, but being honest, the governor has said he doesn't support it, and then we'll see who the next governor is. I don't know where Mr. Stefanowski is on that issue, but I'm not going to be beating my head against the wall if he doesn't want to do it. So I'm willing to work with folks to find areas where we have consensus about how to bring down health insurance costs. So. I think you should be able to buy the same health insurance that I have, but I think we need to pass things, and that's why providing real lower prices is my focus, not any one particular way to get there.
Would you like to speak on that?
Yeah,
Sure.
I wanted to just add one thing about the healthcare stuff, and I think it's related to also some of the shortages we have for actual, skilled personnel, right? Like nurses, right? We have a shortage of 3,000 nurses in this state, and some of the things we can do today, which other states have been looking, and that's another thing, by the way. You're talking about the vision. We should look around our country, our own country, and see what our states used to be the labs of innovation, right? There are Western states which have implemented programs like nursing delegation programs, which actually help more nurses, people who are not college graduates, to assist nurses who are actually licensed, right, to provide preventative care in senior homes and nursing care, right? So in nursing homes. So those are the kind of programs where you can actually build a workforce for the future while you actually solve a real problem. So I would actually look at the nursing delegation program, which Oregon has and a couple of other Western states have, to actually fill that gap we have today. And then there are other things from a workforce perspective, we should be incentivizing people who go to UConn to stay here, right? Or go to Central to stay here in this state. How do you do that? By not canceling their debt, student debt, by actually asking them to do something for the state while we pay for their student loans, right? That is an idea which Maine has gotten behind, right? And Maine has implemented. So there are a lot of places to look at in what other states have been doing to better attract and retain their own talent, and at the same time solve some of the harder problems like workforce problems in the nursing side of things, which directly relate to healthcare costs. I mean, these things are not mutually exclusive. These are all interrelated, costs and personnel. So anyways, I mean, again, I can talk all day, but there are a lot of ideas out there which I would like to talk about when I'm elected.
Henry, I have a question in response to that. And Prakash, I appreciate you talking about nursing delegation, but as I've been in the nursing field for over 30 years, I will tell you nursing delegation does not always work with unskilled people giving shots or giving medication administration. It's a skilled profession that we want people to have the education. We want them to have the certification and the licensure to be able to do what nurses do. So I know that working with many nursing delegations on that topic specifically, we've seen a lot of errors. We've researched it across the country, and I could talk forever on that.
No, and that's what I would love to start a conversation. And I love this, that you bring your point of view as a professional, right? As an expert on the topic. And that's what we should be doing in the state. We should be actually starting this conversation. And if we end up at a place where we say, okay, this does not, it works for Oregon, it does not work for us, so be it.
And that's a great conversation, and perhaps you two can get together and complete that. Are there any other questions? So I have one for all the candidates. As a small business owner, it's getting more and more difficult for small businesses to compete with companies like Amazon, which I've become addicted to. They just offer things, and small businesses have a hard time competing with the Home Depots and the Lowe's, where you can take anything back, and we have live shrubs and live bushes, and you can take them back to Home Depot a year later and get a free one. What do the candidates envision to help small business compete in the world? PANKAJ? Lisa?
I think one of the things, I signed the pledge for the CBIA, and one of the things there are a lot of good stuff in that pledge. And one of the things it has in there is the R&D tax credit, and it has the pass-through entity tax. Those are the two things which I think are good places to start. There's also the solvency issue with our fund, right, with the unemployment fund, with the pandemic, right? So I think that the solvency issue needs to be addressed. Talking more specifically about the Amazons of the world, right? I think we are at a place where it is more of a federal issue, Henry, if you ask me, in terms of how do we deal with big businesses, what the model is now at this point of antitrust, right? So the federal government has looked at companies like Amazon and said, hey, can we apply the old rules of antitrust to these companies like we used to apply to Standard Oil? And part of the problem is that those rules were written like in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. So we cannot apply that. A lot of this, we are uncompetitive. You are uncompetitive with Amazon as a small business, not just because, the state policies, but also some of the policies that the federal government has in place, which makes it harder for smaller businesses to compete, right? So I think it's a little bit of a bigger issue than even the state. Definitely on the state side, we can look at unfunded mandates and regulations and things like that, like which we should be looking at. To open a business, by the way, I used to have a consulting business, a statistical consulting business. Just to maintain that with just myself, I have to fill up so much paperwork. I know things have gotten a little better over the last couple of years, maybe. Like there's certain things that has, been implemented. But I think we can do a lot better on the regulation side, on the in just like formation of businesses, right, and maintenance of businesses, and what do you ask them to do in terms of paperwork and filings and things like that, and fees. But I think as a bigger issue, I think we should be looking at our federal antitrust laws. I know this does not fall here, but if you do some reading today, Google it and read about it. The federal government has been trying to make that case, antitrust case, to help small business and local businesses. They're not able to make it because that framework does not apply very well. So I think, again, that's for our US Senator, I guess, but hey, that's my 2 cents, Senator.
Thank you.
Is that for all of us? Sure. Well, we're at a point right now where the federal government has passed 2 big infrastructure acts that are really giving states, for the first time, a real ability to invest records amount of money in, figuring out where we want to go for the next generation. And I think it's really, really important that working with Mark Boughton, who's our infrastructure czar in Connecticut, that we're prioritizing a small business. That not only do we have a small business set aside, but that it really works. And then we have to tackle, as I mentioned earlier, some of the unique challenges like healthcare, but also electricity, some of the property taxes that disproportionately burden small businesses and give them an unequal playing field against their larger competitors. And let's just be real. I think small businesses can compete against large companies. I think they can do a very good job doing it, but not when the deck is stacked against them. And that's what we see when you can't afford health insurance because only a large company has that purchasing power. You can't afford to deal with property taxes because that has a disproportionate impact on smaller businesses. So we've got to address those, and I think if we do, we'll be better positioned. And I agree with PANKAJ that antitrust is an important component as well. And I see that in the healthcare space, but that's true across the economy. Oh, I will say one other thing, one area of quick disagreement. The CBIA pledge had one thing that I very much disagreed with, and that's the only reason I didn't sign it, was that they wanted to strip away some of our state licenses. And I heard the question earlier about nursing, but also in the construction fields. I think that actually is a real threat to some of our Connecticut small businesses, is this proposal to make it easier for out-of-state practitioners to come in. I think that could bring down wages and also threaten a lot of our local small businesses. So that's a real concern that I have, and that's not something I'm likely to support in the next session.
So I'm not qualified to speak on federal issues, so I'm going to say what I would do at the state level. We have to approach this from a very holistic stance. We really don't have strong communities anymore, and that's because Connecticut is not affordable. It's because we have an aging population. It's because when our kids graduate from college, they can't find a job here, and they can't open a business here because it's too expensive. So we have to start at that very fundamental level of making Connecticut more affordable, and so that people, you guys, you are the innovators, you're the job creators, you're the risk takers, and we need to be supporting you. We haven't been doing that. I can tell you as a solo practitioner, I never faced the problems that I see my husband face. My husband started with maybe a handful of people many years ago in a transportation company. He now probably employs close to 600 people in the state of Connecticut. It's been incredibly hard to navigate this global pandemic as a business owner, and it's been incredibly hard even pre-pandemic. So making Connecticut affordable is going to help our businesses be able to succeed. And it comes to basic things like even when we talk about taxes, right? And here again is a good example of the disconnect between what state lawmakers think needs to happen and the actual effect of those policies on municipalities. And I'm going to give you one example, the car tax, okay? Car taxes, we told by the governor, we're going to cap the mill rate on the car tax, and we're going to make it equal across the state. Everybody's going to pay the same across the state, right? And then when folks like me, mayors, went to the governor, we said, we're really concerned about this. How are we going to make up this loss of revenue in our budget? Because one of the other problems is as municipalities, we rely almost entirely on taxes. And we rely on the state to reimburse us, and they haven't been reimbursing us when they're supposed to be. And so they said to us, well, don't worry about it, because we're going to reimburse you for whatever those losses are. Well, I can tell you here in Rocky Hill, people were outraged because their car taxes went up because the value of used cars went up. That was predictable, right? But then I got outraged, and you know why? Because I wasn't reimbursed that $160,000, $180,000 that we lost in revenue. And we were told, well, don't worry about it, you can get it next year. Well, that didn't help this year's budget. So, it's one of those things when you're working as a lawmaker and you want everything to be equal, you need to understand that equality doesn't equal equity. And that's another disconnect. So I think starting at the fundamental level is going to be the best way to support businesses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more questions? Oh, one more.
Just one. So I think everybody is in agreement that our cost of living is high, and we've talked about property taxes, we've talked about insurance. What about utility costs? How do we address rising costs of electricity, water, and oil? What can you do at the state level to try to address that for everybody too?
Okay, and that'll be our final question. Thank you.
So, frankly, I think there needs to be better partnerships, better communication, and bringing folks to the table and looking at better regulation of some of these entities. Because we've seen that, we've recently had this huge spike in electricity. Water will fluctuate. But the price of liquid gas right now is incredibly expensive, and that's going to affect electricity bills coming into the winter. And we really need to start partnering with these larger entities so that we can have a fundamental understanding of how can we help you what is it that's driving your costs, right? And let us address that at a very basic level before you start passing all of that expense on to the taxpayers, because it is problematic.
It's a really important question. I can tell you on, I'll start with I think the biggest one, which is the price of electricity. And we have been working to change the way that we regulate electricity in the state because we have been paying through the nose and getting really lousy service. And it's really unacceptable to see, prolonged power outages when we're paying some of the highest rates in the country. So we have changed the way, and there was just an article out, I think this week, talking about it, about asking PURA, our state electricity regulator, to pay Eversource based on their performance, and instead of just guaranteeing them a profit, even when they do a lousy job. Some of the issues, though, that we're seeing in the last, over the summer, we saw a big spike in electricity prices that was, I think, beyond our control largely. It was due to a spike in natural gas prices. And we're more dependent on natural gas than a lot of other states. And when we saw natural gas prices spark globally, in part due to the war in Europe, that had an impact on prices here. On gas prices, we were responsive. We saw prices spike up early in the spring, and we came in and we suspended the gas tax. And it was originally just going to be for a few weeks, but then we saw prices continue to be high, and we extended that until December. We'll have to see where things are. I know that they came down pretty dramatically, but now with the Saudis cutting back on production, they're going back up. So I don't know whether we'll extend that or not. At some point, we do need a gas tax to be able to invest in infrastructure, but we've been able to, because our tax receipts have been so strong this year, we've been able to move money over to make sure that we're not we're not depleting our special transportation funds. And then water is tricky. I mean, locally, you've got a municipal entity, the MDC, in charge of water in Rocky Hill. The mayor's I think you're on the board. Is that, the mayor appoints people to the board. I don't know if you're on it yourself.
No, we do put something.
Okay. And so that's a challenge, is just making sure that those costs are manageable as well.
So like a lot of things we do, we don't look at the fundamental reason for the problem. We look at the symptoms, right? So if you're going to create more regulation around a regulated entity like Eversource, I'm all for measuring outcomes. They should be held accountable for those outcomes, right? But the fundamental problem is the distribution cost, right? It's actually your usage cost is lower than your distribution cost. And if that is your bill, you have a fundamental problem. I'm in business, I do analytics for a living. I look at these problems and I say, half of these things we talk about are just symptoms of the problem. Nobody is addressing that distribution cost. I think that's where we should be looking at. And why is that distribution cost so high? There are many reasons for it. It's infrastructure. It's about generation, where electricity is generated. A lot of those factors are factors we have to look at from a little bit out of the box perspective. We keep looking at the stuff like the same thing, and we say, hey, how can we regulate more? Hey, here you go, and let's tax these people a little bit more so that they feel the pain a little bit like we are paying. No, it does not make my life better if Eversource is suffering a little bit more and earning less profits. No, I want them to make money. That's fine with me. We live in a capitalistic society, okay? That's why I'm in America. Let's all of us make money, all right? The point is, what is the problem we are trying to solve? Okay? The problem we are trying to solve is the electricity cost. And let's look at the fundamental reason for that high electricity. That's the distribution cost. And that's where I will go to answer your question, really. And what we are doing on the generation side, right? We should look at other options. We should look at solar, all of the above. Whatever brings it down, essentially. If we want more windmills, yeah, I'm happy to look at that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying, the only way I can do this is tax people more or penalize businesses more. I'm talking generally now, right? I want to look at these problems more on a fundamental level and see like where we can fix them. Like the same idea with the nursing shortage. Let's have that conversation. Why do we have a nursing shortage? Same thing applies here. So again, we should be measuring outcomes. We should be holding businesses accountable, our utilities accountable, but we should also look at these problems on a more fundamental level. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our candidates. Do we have closing remarks from the chamber? We do.
And I'll be brief because we want to be sharp and be done by 9, so I've got 2 minutes. I may talk very fast. No, first and foremost, I really want to thank the candidates for all the time and effort that you put into this. We know how difficult it is to run, but you can see the passion and commitment to making Connecticut a much better place to live, work, and play, and I certainly love to play, so I appreciate all your dedication to that. A couple of things I want to highlight about the chamber. Obviously, our last meeting, I pretty much went over who we are, what we do, but some things I really want to highlight. So we have our next breakfast meeting on November 7th. It's right here at the Sheraton. It is our Support the Troops meeting. It's with Admiral Kelly from the Coast Guard. It's one of my favorite events that we hold every year. It is our way of saying thank you to our veterans. Thank you to all our troops that are out there. It is such a special event. I really would encourage you, if you want to come to one breakfast a year, that is the one to go to. So that is at the Sheraton on November 7th from 8 to 9. Some of you were able to come to our Business After Work that we just had. For those of you who aren't familiar with those, they're a great resource for you to really get out there and network and meet new people from all over Middlesex County. Our next one is going to be held on December 1st. It's right on Main Street at Main Street Market. They open up all the shops, give you special deals, but you really get a great time to network, free beer, wine, and food, and it's a great time, so come on out. Just in closing, we understand the employee shortage and what employers are going through. We face it ourselves. We see it out there. We're holding a career fair on November 3rd at the Courtyard by Marriott in Cromwell from 10:30 to 1:30. We are maxed out at 50 companies. We just released it last week. We already have 37 in. One of our focuses this year is really on the retiree population. Obviously we heard about the Gray Wave and everything that happened in the spring. Well, some of these people had a great summer, but they're ready to get back to work and maybe some good job sharing. So if anyone knows anybody who's looking for a job, please come out that day. Or if you're an employer and you're looking to hire, contact me at the chamber or Joe, who's your liaison to the Rocky Hill Division, and we'll get you all set up. But thank you again to the candidates for coming out. Thank you to Rocky Hill Division. We're very proud to have brought you on to the chamber. Our doors are always open. Our emails are always on. If you ever have any questions at all, by all means, reach out. We're here to support you in any way we can. And as Larry McHugh always says, the sun always shines in Middlesex County, and it's bright today. It may have been cold. I got you. But it's beautiful out today. So thank you very much and enjoy the day.